Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. James Baird pulled his pickup truck into the driveway of his modest suburban home. The August humidity hung heavy in the Asheville air, clinging to his skin as he stepped out of the vehicle. His muscles ached from a 12-hour shift at the welding shop, but there was satisfaction in the work in creating something solid and real with his hands. The house was dark except for a single kitchen light. Strange. Sophia usually left the porch light on for him. He fished his keys from his pocket, the familiar weight of the metal reassuring in his calloused palm. When he pushed open the front door, the silence hit him first. No music, no TV, just the hum of the refrigerator and something wrong in the air. "Sophia," he called, dropping his lunchbox on the side table. No answer. James moved through the living room, past the furniture they'd scrounged from yard sales and slowly replaced piece by piece over their 8 years together. His boots were heavy on the hardwood floors. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the countertops. That's when he saw them. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, her face a mask of cold indifference. Behind her stood Noah Holloway, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Noah's gym-sculpted physique seemed out of place in James's kitchen, like an expensive vase on a discount store shelf. "What's going on?" James asked, his voice steady despite the sudden tightness in his chest. Sophia's eyes met his, empty of the warmth they once held. "Go away," she said, the words falling between them like stones. "We hate everything about you. We never asked you to help." James stood perfectly still, letting the words sink in. "We." The pronoun hung in the air between them. Noah stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You hurt her, man. It's over." James's gaze traveled from Noah's hand to Sophia's face, searching for something regret, shame, anything that might indicate this was a mistake. There was nothing. "How long?" he asked. "Long enough," Noah replied, his voice rich with satisfaction. "Long enough to know she deserves better than." He gestured vaguely at James's work clothes, the grease still under his fingernails. "This." James could feel something rising in him, a tide of rage, of hurt, of betrayal. He pushed it down, locked it away. "Not here. Not now. I see," he said finally, his voice a controlled rumble. He turned and walked to their bedroom. "No, not there's any more," and pulled out the duffel bag from under the bed. He filled it methodically. Jeans, shirts, work boots, the watch his uncle gave him before he died. The photographs he left untouched. The wedding ring he removed and placed on the dresser without ceremony. When he returned to the kitchen, Noah had made himself comfortable, leaning against the counter as if he owned the place, sipping from one of James's coffee mugs. "That's it." Sophia's voice held a note of surprise. "You're just leaving?" James looked at her for the first time since he'd walked in. The woman he'd loved, built a life with, sacrifice for. The woman who'd just destroyed everything with 3 sentences. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." As he turned to leave, his eye caught the small magnet on the refrigerator, a cheap souvenir from their weekend trip to Charleston years ago. Underneath, it was a folded piece of paper, the rent receipt for the house. He almost reached for it, then stopped. Let them have it. He had everything he needed. The night air hit him like a wave as he stepped outside. He loaded his bag into the pickup, climbed in, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, he could see the silhouette of Noah in the doorway of what used to be his home. James didn't look back as he drove away. The road blurred before James as memories washed over him like a fever. He was 10 years old again, standing in the rain at his parents' funeral. His uncle, Brian, a hard man with gentle eyes, placing a calloused hand on his shoulder. "It's you and me now, kid. No flowery promises, no false comfort, just the truth and the promise to face it together." Uncle Brian had taught him everything worth knowing. How to work with his hands, how to stand his ground, how to be a man of his word. The old Marine had seen the worst of humanity in Vietnam, but still believed in honor, in keeping your promises, in building something that would last. "People will let you down, Jimmy," he'd say, cleaning his fishing gear on the porch of their small house. "But if you've got your own respect, You've got something nobody can take away. Brian had died of a heart attack during James's first year of community college. Another funeral, another goodbye, another lesson in how quickly things could change at IT was 3 weeks later when James first saw Sophia in the campus cafeteria. She'd been arguing with the cashier over the price of a salad, her voice carrying across the room. When a manager came over, she turned on the charm, all smiles and apologies, and walked away with a discount and the manager's personal phone number. James had been impressed by her confidence, her ability to navigate the world with such ease. He'd grown up fighting for every inch. Sophia seemed to glide through life on charm alone. Their first date had been at a dive bar near campus. She'd ordered expensive cocktails and told him about her family, her distant father who ran a successful insurance company, her mother who organized charity galas but never had time for her children, her emotionally detached older brother Briggs, who was following in their father's footsteps. "They want me to be this perfect little doll," she'd said, lips stained red from her third Cosmopolitan. "Go to business school, marry some boring executive, have 2.5 kids, and a golden retriever." She'd leaned in close then, her breath warm against his ear. "But I want more than that. I want to be free." James had fallen hard and fast. She was everything he wasn't: spontaneous, outgoing, ambitious. When she spoke about opening her own art gallery someday, her eyes lit up with a passion that made his chest ache. "I believe in you," he told her, and he meant it. They got married 2 years later, a small ceremony that her parents didn't attend. Her brother Briggs showed up late and left early. It didn't matter to James. They had each other. They had plans that he took extra welding jobs, worked weekends and holidays to save for her gallery. Sophia talked about it constantly at first, sketching floor plans on napkins, dragging him to other galleries for research. When they finally had enough for a small space downtown, he'd work nights and weekends to renovate it himself. New floors, fresh paint, track lighting that showed off the artwork just right. Watching her face when he handed her the keys had been the proudest moment of his life. 6 months later, she closed it down. "It's too stressful," she'd explained, lying on the couch while he made dinner after a 12-hour shift. "The artists are so demanding, and the customers are so picky. I need a break." The break never ended. The money he'd saved, the hours he'd worked, the dreams they'd shared, all of it gone, just like that. And now this. James blinked, realizing he'd been sitting in his truck outside Dylan's apartment complex for 10 minutes, lost in the past. He grabbed his duffel bag and headed for apartment 3B. Dylan Maris answered the door on the second knock. James's cousin looked him up and down, taking in the duffel bag and the hard set of his jaw. "Shit," Dylan said. "She finally did it, huh?" James nodded once. No need for explanations. Dylan had seen it coming even if James hadn't. "Come on in." Dylan stepped aside. "Beer's in the fridge. Couch is yours for as long as you need it." Dylan's apartment was small but clean, the furniture minimal but comfortable. Framed vintage boxing posters decorated the walls. Ali, Foreman, Tyson. The smell of protein powder and clean laundry hung in the air. James dropped his bag by the couch. "Thanks." Dylan disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 beers. He handed one to James and settled into the armchair across from him. "Want to talk about it?" Dylan asked. James took a long pull from his beer. "Not much to say. Came home. She was with Noah Holloway. Told me to leave." Dylan's eyebrows shot up. "Noah Holloway? That franchise gym guy? The one with the billboards?" James nodded. "What a piece of work." Dylan shook his head. "Isn't he married to that real estate woman? Maura something? Maura Holloway." James had met her once at a community fundraiser. Tall, competent kind of eyes. She didn't deserve this either. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "You know," Dylan finally said, "I could use another trainer at the gym. Not full-time at first, but enough to keep you busy. You still remember your way around a boxing ring." The corner of James's mouth twitched slightly. In high school, before welding took over his life, he'd been a promising amateur boxer. Dylan had always said he had natural talent, that with the right training he could have gone pro. "I remember enough," James replied. "Good." Dylan nodded. "Start tomorrow if you want. Pays cash. Nothing fancy like that chain gym bullshit, but it's honest work." James thought about it. teaching others to fight, to defend themselves, to stand their ground. There was something right about that. "I'll be there," he said. Later, after Dylan had gone to bed, James stood at the apartment window, looking out at the Asheville skyline. The city lights blurred as his mind returned to the moment Sophia's cold eyes, Noah's smug face, the words that had sliced through 8 years of marriage like they were nothing. "Duck, go away. We hate everything about you. We never asked you to help." Something shifted inside him then, something cold and hard and certain. He wouldn't crumble. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't make a scene that, James Baird would do something much worse that he would rebuild. And then, when the time was right, he would show them exactly what they'd thrown away. "Keep your guard up, Mike. That's it now, pivot and jab." James watched as the heavy-set man followed his instructions, sweat pouring down his face as he worked the punching bag. Mike was a 40-something accountant who'd joined the gym after his doctor warned him about his blood pressure. 3 weeks in, and he was already showing improvement. "Good. That's enough for today. Stretch it out, get some water." Mike nodded gratefully, chest heaving. "Thanks, coach. Same time Thursday. I'll be here," James confirmed, already unwrapping the tape from his own hands. It had been 6 weeks since that night. 6 weeks of sunrise runs, of learning the rhythm of Dylan's gym, of falling into bed exhausted enough to sleep without dreams. 6 weeks without a word to or from Sophia. The gym was nothing like Holloway Fitness, Noah's Chrome, and glass monstrosity across town. Victory Boxing was old-school brick walls, concrete floors, equipment that had been around for decades, but was meticulously maintained. No juice bar, no spa treatments, no virtual reality cycling classes. Just sweat and discipline and transformation. The evening crowd thinned out. James took his turn on the heavy bag, losing himself in the familiar rhythm. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each impact sent a satisfying jolt up his arms. Each exhale pushed the poison out a little more. "You try to murder that bag, or what?" The voice pulled him back to the present. Imani Cross stood a few feet away, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, arms crossed over her chest. She was watching him with one eyebrow raised, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of her mouth. James hadn't noticed her come in. He stepped back from the bag, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "Just a light workout," he said. Imani snorted. "Yeah, right. And I'm just here for the smoothies." She dropped her gym bag and began wrapping her hands with practiced efficiency. Imani worked at Victory part-time, teaching kickboxing classes 3 nights a week. The rest of her time was split between caring for her 10-year-old son and working as an office manager at a local law firm. She was tough, direct, and didn't waste time on small-talk qualities James had come to appreciate. "How's Dion?" he asked, referring to her son. "Science fair tomorrow. He built a volcano that actually took over my entire kitchen for a week." She shook her head, but her pride was evident in her voice. "He wants to know when you're coming over to teach him that left hook you promised." "Soon," James said, when things settled down. Imani shot him a look as she started her warm-up. "It's been what, almost 2 months? Seems pretty settled to me." James didn't respond, focusing instead on his breathing as he continued his workout. "You know," Imani said after a few minutes of companionable silence, "my ex thought the world would stop turning when he left. Thought I'd fall apart, come crawling back." She landed a particularly vicious kick on the bag. 6 years later, and I'm still waiting for him to realize I'm better off." James paused, meeting her eyes. There was understanding there, and something else a challenge. "I'm not falling apart," he said. "I can see that." Imani nodded toward the gym floor, where several clients were finishing their workouts. "These people respect you. Dylan says you're the best trainer he's hired in years. You got friends here." She paused. "But you're not moving forward either. You're just suspended." The truth of her words hit harder than any punch. James had been living in a strange limbo, not grieving, not healing, just existing. "What happened?" Imani asked quietly. "Dylan wouldn't tell me. Just said you needed time." James hesitated. He hadn't told anyone the full story, not even Dylan. But there was something about Imani, her directness, her lack of pity that made him want to talk. "My wife left me," he said finally. Fanoa Holloway. Imani's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of her surprise. Wow, mister, my biceps have their own zip code. That guy. Despite everything, James felt the corner of his mouth twitch. That's the one. Imani rolled her eyes. Classic fragile ego, wrapped in muscle. She studied him for a moment. So what are you going to do about it? Do. Yeah, do. You're not the type to roll over. I figured you had some kind of plan. James looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in 6 weeks, he smirked. Not quite a smile, but close. I'm working on it, he said. Later that night, after a late dinner with Dylan, James emptied his duffel bag to do laundry. He'd been living out of it since that night, refusing to fully unpack in Dylan's apartment. It was temporary. Everything was temporary now. As he sorted through the clothes, his fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper in the side pocket. He pulled it out, unfolded it with careful fingers. The rent receipt that he stared at it, the official letterhead of Asheville Properties, the address of what used to be his home, his name printed clearly under tenant. His name alone. The memory surfaced like a bubble rising through water. They'd found the house 2 years into their marriage. Sophia had fallen in love with the bay windows and the small backyard where she swore she'd plant a garden. The landlord, Avery Stein, an aging hippie with a strict adherence to rules, had insisted on meeting them both before approving the application. It's nothing personal, Avery had explained, peering at them over horn-rimmed glasses. I just like to know who's living in my properties. The lease, however, had gone in James's name alone. His credit was better, his income more stable. Sophia had been between jobs at the time, having quit her position at the gallery. We can add you to the lease later, James had promised her, but they never had. Life had gotten busy, and it hadn't seemed important. The rent was automatically deducted from James's account each month. The bills were in his name. The property, legally speaking, was his responsibility, which meant it was still his. James sat very still, the paper light in his hands but heavy with possibility. Sophia and Noah were living in his house. The house he'd maintained, improved, paid for. The house they'd so confidently assumed was theirs to keep when they'd told him to leave. But they were wrong that he reached for his phone, scrolled through the contacts until he found the number he needed. It was late, but this couldn't wait. Avery Stein, a crisp voice, answered on the 4th ring. Mr. Stein, it's James Baird. I apologize for calling at this hour, but I have a question about my lease. There was a pause. James. No, it's fine. What can I help you with? I'm currently not living at the property, but I wanted to confirm something. The lease is still under my name only, correct? Let me check. The sound of typing came through the line. Yes, that's correct. The lease is in your name only, with automatic payments scheduled through your bank account. Everything's current. James closed his eyes briefly. And there have been no requests to transfer the lease to another party? No, nothing like that. Is there a problem? James? Are you planning to terminate the lease? No, Mr. Stein. I'm planning to enforce it. There was a beat of silence. I see, Avery said, his voice careful now. The people currently occupying the property, they're there without your permission? That's correct. Then they're trespassing, Avery said, a note of indignation creeping into his voice. I don't allow my properties to be sublet without approval. It's in the contract. I know, James said, his voice steady. And I appreciate your strictness about the rules, Mr. Stein. I'd like to discuss my options. By the time the call ended, James had a plan of seat of one, at least. He folded the receipt carefully and placed it in his wallet. For the first time since that night, he felt something other than numbness or rage, that he felt in control. You sure about this, man? Dylan asked, adjusting the small camera hidden in his jacket. Seems a little, stalkerish. James checked the time on his phone. According to Janine Teller's text, Sophia's supposed best friend who'd reached out to James just to check in, Noah and Sophia, would be at the River Arts District Farmers Market this morning. It's not stalking, James replied. It's research. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Dylan shrugged. If you say so. But remember, I'm a boxing coach, not a spy. This cloak and dagger stuff isn't really my thing. They positioned themselves at a coffee stand with a good view of the market entrance. 20 minutes later, Sophia appeared, dressed in an expensive sundress James had never seen before. Noah walked beside her, one possessive arm draped around her shoulders. "There," James said quietly. Dylan adjusted his position, making sure the camera captured them clearly. "That's them, huh? They look happy." James watched as Noah bought Sophia a bouquet of fresh flowers, as she laughed at something he said, as they moved through the market like they owned it. Like they'd done nothing wrong. Like they hadn't destroyed someone's life without a second thought. "They're not happy," James said. "They're performing." After a while, Dylan nudged him. "Dude, check it out. 3 o'clock. James looked where Dylan indicated. Noah and Sophia had stopped at a bench to enjoy their coffees. Their body language had changed. Noah, sitting with his legs spread wide, taking up space. Sophia leaning in, her hand on his thigh. "Let's get closer," James said. "I want to hear them." They moved casually through the crowd, stopping at a vendor selling honey just a few feet from a bench. Finally getting rid of the trash, Noah was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "You should have done it years ago." Sophia sighed dramatically. "I know. I wasted so much time on him. But now we can start fresh, with no more dead weight holding us back." James felt Dylan stiffen beside him, but he placed a warning hand on his cousin's arm. "Not now. How much longer till we can sell the house?" Noah asked. "My investment guy says the market's hot right now." Sophia waved a dismissive hand. "Soon. We just need to get all of James's junk out of the garage first. I can't believe he left all that crap behind." "I'll rent a dumpster," Noah said magnanimously. "We'll clear it out next weekend, then call a realtor." James had heard enough. He turned away, Dylan following close behind. "They're planning to sell your house?" Dylan asked incredulously once they were out of earshot. "Can they even do that?" "No," James said. "They can't, and they won't." Back at the apartment, James reviewed the footage Dylan had captured. Noah and Sophia, flaunting their relationship, talking about getting rid of the trash. Noah, casually discussing selling a house he had no legal right to. It was all evidence, pieces of a puzzle James was carefully assembling, but he needed more. "You still friends with that IT guy? The one who helped you set up the gym security system?" James asked Dylan that evening. "Rick? Yeah, why?" "I need information on Noah Holloway's business. Public records, whatever's available online." Dylan raised an eyebrow. "You going after his money?" "I'm going after the truth," James corrected. "Holloway presents himself as this successful businessman, but something doesn't add up. The way he's rushing to sell the house, he needs cash." Dylan considered this. "Rick's good, but legal stuff might be better handled by someone who knows the system." He paused. "What about asking Imani? She works for lawyers. Might have access to more resources." It was a good suggestion. Imani had become a steady presence in James's new life. Her pragmatic attitude and dark humor a welcome contrast to the emotional chaos he'd left behind. She'd never asked for details about his marriage, but she'd made it clear she was on his side. The next day, James approached her after a kickboxing class. "I need a favor," he said without preamble. Imani wiped sweat from her forehead with a towel. "Hello to you too, sunshine. What kind of favor?" "Information on Noah Holloway and his business." She studied him, those sharp eyes missing nothing. "The guy who's with your wife." "Ex-wife," James corrected automatically, though no papers have been filed yet. "I need to know if his gym is as successful as he claims. Financial information, corporate structure, anything you can find." "That's a big ask," Imani said slowly. "Some of that might not be public record. I understand if you can't." "I didn't say I couldn't," she cut him off. "I said it's a big ask. As in, you're going to owe me big time." James nodded. "Name your price." Dion needs help with his science project for the regional competition. The volcano was just a qualifier. For the main event, he wants to build something with electronics, and I'm useless with that stuff. Despite everything, James felt a genuine smile tugging at his lips. "That's it? Help your kid with his science project. Trust me, it's a bigger commitment than you think. He's very particular." She held out her hand. "Do we have a deal?" James shook it. "Deal." 2 days later, Imani showed up at Dylan's apartment with a folder tucked under her arm and a grim expression on her face. "You're going to want to see this," she said, spreading the contents of the folder across the kitchen table, financial statements, corporate registration documents, news clippings, a maze of information that Imani navigated with practiced ease. Holloway Fitness isn't doing well, she explained, pointing to a series of numbers that showed declining revenue. 3 of their locations have closed in the last year. They're cutting staff at the others. Why? James asked. Fitness is a growth industry. Competition, mainly. Cheaper chains moving in, plus those app-based workout programs that don't require a gym membership at all. She pulled out another document. But here's the kicker. Holloway doesn't own the business outright. His wife, Maura, owns 51%. James stared at the partnership agreement. Maura Holloway's name printed clearly at the top. Does she know about Sophia? Imani shook her head. No idea. But there's more. She pushed forward a marriage certificate. Noah and Maura have only been married for 2 years. There's a clause in their partnership agreement that protects her investment in case of divorce. If Noah caused a split, say, by cheating, he gets nothing. The pieces were falling into place now, a clear picture emerging from the chaos. Noah Holloway, the successful businessman with the perfect life, was actually a failing entrepreneur desperate for cash. And he'd targeted Sophia, and by extension, James's house, as a quick solution. I think, James said slowly, it's time to introduce Maura Holloway to my wife. The next piece fell into place more easily than James had anticipated. Janine Teller had been leaving increasingly concerned messages for him, her tone oscillating between sympathy and barely concealed interest. I'm so worried about you, James. Sophia isn't herself lately. I've tried talking to her, but she won't listen to me anymore. Maybe we could meet for coffee? Just to talk. James had ignored the messages at first, but now he saw an opportunity. Janine had always harbored feelings for him, feelings that Sophia had mockingly pointed out more than once during their marriage. Poor Janine, always wanting what she can't have, she'd say with casual cruelty. He called Janine on a Tuesday evening, keeping his voice carefully neutral. James, I'm so glad you called, she gushed. I've been so worried. I appreciate the concern, he said. I think you're right. We should talk. They met at a quiet cafe downtown the next afternoon. Janine arrived wearing too much perfume and a sympathetic expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. You look good, she said, reaching across the table to touch his arm. Better than I expected, honestly. James gave her a tight smile. I'm managing. Sophia is making a huge mistake, Janine said, leaning forward. Everyone can see it. Noah Holloway is, well, he's not who he pretends to be. What do you mean? James asked, feigning ignorance. Janine glanced around dramatically before lowering her voice. He's using her. I've heard things about his business, about his marriage. He's desperate for money. His marriage. James repeated, as if this was news to him. Oh, you didn't know? He's married to Maura Holloway, the real estate developer. They're still together, as far as anyone knows. He's been hiding Sophia like a dirty secret. James allowed his expression to darken. That's surprising. I try to tell Sophia, but she won't listen to me anymore. Janine's eyes filled with tears that James suspected were rehearsed. We've been friends since college, and now she barely returns my calls. It's like Noah has her under some kind of spell. That must be hard for you, James said carefully. Watching your friend make such a mistake. It is, Janine exclaimed, clearly pleased by his understanding. If only there was a way to make her see what's really happening. James took a sip of his coffee, letting the moment stretch. Then, as if the idea had just occurred to him, maybe there is. He explained his plan. Simply, he had evidence of Noah and Sophia's affair, footage that clearly showed their relationship. If Janine could get that information to Maura Holloway, it might force Noah to reveal his true intentions. You want me to tell his wife? Janine's eyes widened with scandalized delight. Only if you think it's the right thing to do, James said, playing to her desire to be the hero of the story. Maybe it would even help Sophia in the long run. Janine nodded eagerly. It would. Sophia needs a wake-up call, and Maura deserves to know the truth. I could call her office. I know someone who works in real estate who could connect us. That's very brave of you, James said, but you should probably not mention my involvement. This isn't about revenge for me. It's about people facing the consequences of their choices. Janine reached across the table again, squeezing his hand. You're such a good man, James. Sophia never deserved you. 1 week later, Dylan burst into the apartment, his face flushed with excitement. Dude, it worked. Maura Holloway just crashed Noah's promotional event at the gym, the big one he's been advertising all month. Completely lost it in front of everyone. Called him out for cheating, named Sophia specifically, the whole 9 yards. James looked up from the book he was reading. Anyone get on video? Dylan grinned. Better than that. It was during a live Instagram thing. The whole meltdown is already online. He pulled out his phone, found the video, and handed it to James. There was Noah, mid-speech about transformation and personal growth, when Maura stormed in, elegant in a gray business suit despite the fury radiating from her. Transformation. Her voice cut through the crowd. How about we talk about how you've transformed into a lying, cheating piece of garbage, Noah? The camera shook as the person filming tried to capture everything. Noah's face went from confusion to shock to panic in seconds. Maura, what are you? Don't. She held up her hand. Don't you dare play dumb. I know about Sophia Baird. I know you've been sleeping with her for months. I know you're living in her house, while her actual husband, is gone. The crowd murmured. Someone whistled. This isn't the place. Noah started. It's exactly the place. Maura cut him off. You want to talk transformation? How about the transformation of our bank accounts once my lawyers are done with you? How about the transformation of your living situation when you're sleeping in your car? She turned to the stunned crowd. Show's over, folks. Holloway Fitness is under new management, effective immediately. And Mr. Holloway himself? He's officially unemployed. The video ended with Noah standing alone in the center of the room, his promotional banner hanging limply behind him. Holy shit, Dylan breathed. She went nuclear on him. James nodded, a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. One down, he said quietly. One to go. The final piece of James's plan came together faster than he'd anticipated. 3 days after Maura Holloway's public meltdown, he received a call from Avery Stein. James, we have a situation at the property, Avery said without preamble. Mrs. Winslow next door called the police about suspicious activity in the garage. They found drug paraphernalia. James frowned. Drug paraphernalia? That's not possible. Well, that's what the report says. I've already issued an eviction notice based on violation of the lease terms. The current occupants have 72 hours to vacate. I see, James said carefully. And you're sure about this? About the legal grounds? Absolutely, Avery assured him. Your lease explicitly prohibits illegal substances on the property. As the legal tenant, you're technically responsible, but since you haven't been living there, I'm holding the unauthorized occupants accountable. He paused. You mentioned wanting to return to the property. Is that still your intention? Yes, James said. I'll be moving back in as soon as possible. Good. The eviction is set for Friday morning at 9. I'd like you to be present, along with a police escort I've arranged. Evictions can get complicated. James hung up, mind racing. He hadn't planted anything in the garage, wouldn't know how to obtain illegal drugs, even if he'd wanted to. But Mrs. Winslow, the retired schoolteacher next door, had always been overly vigilant about the neighborhood. She called the police once when a delivery person knocked on the wrong door. Had she actually found something? Or had she simply seen an opportunity to rid the street of the new neighbor she'd been complaining about to anyone who would listen? Either way, it worked in James's favor. He made 3 calls that evening. One to Dylan, asking him to take the morning off to accompany him. One to Amani, who agreed to be his second witness. And one to his bank, changing the locks on the property to the eviction. Friday morning dawned clear and cool. James parked his truck a block away from the house and walked the rest of the distance, Dylan and Amani flanking him like bodyguards. Avery Stein was already there, clipboard in hand, speaking with 2 police officers next to a patrol car. Ah, James, you're right on time, Avery said, shaking his hand. These officers will ensure everything proceeds smoothly. The older of the 2 officers, a sergeant with salt and pepper hair, nodded to James. We're just here to keep the peace, sir. Mr. Stein has all the necessary paperwork. As they approached the house, the front door flew open. Sophia stood there, her face contorted with rage, still wearing what appeared to be pajamas despite the late morning hour. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving a piece of paper, presumably the eviction notice. "You can't do this to us." James said nothing, letting Avery step forward. "Mrs. Baird, as I explained in the notice, you're being evicted for violation of the lease terms. Illegal substances were found on the property, which is grounds for immediate termination of the rental agreement." "That's bullshit." Noah appeared behind Sophia, his face flushed with anger. "We didn't have any drugs. That old bat next door is crazy." "Regardless," Avery continued calmly, "you are not authorized occupants of this property. The lease is in Mr. Baird's name only, and he has not given permission for you to reside here." Sophia's eyes darted to James, really seeing him for the first time. "You," she breathed. "You're behind this." James met her gaze steadily. "The house is in my name, Sophia. It always has been." "But we're married," she protested. "What's yours is mine." "Actually, ma'am," one of the officers interjected, "that's not how rental agreements work. If your name isn't on the lease, you have no legal right to the property." Noah pushed past Sophia, advancing on James with clenched fists. "You think you're clever? You think this solves anything? I'll destroy you for this." James didn't flinch. "Try," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "I'll end you before you raise a hand." The threat hung in the air between them. Noah's eyes flickered to the police officers, to Dylan's imposing presence, to Imani's unflinching stare. He backed down, jaw clenched in impotent rage. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings," Avery announced. "Clothing, medications, important documents. Everything else will be inventoried and stored for 30 days, after which it becomes property of the landlord." 30 minutes. Sophia's voice rose in panic. "That's not enough time. We have furniture, artwork, my clothes, none of which is leaving with you today," Avery said firmly. "The officers will accompany you to ensure you take only what's allowed." What followed was a chaotic scramble as Sophia and Noah tried to gather whatever they could, all under the watchful eyes of the police. Sophia alternated between begging and threatening, her composure completely shattered. "James, please," she pleaded when the officers weren't looking. "We could talk about this. We can work something out." He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no satisfaction. Just emptiness where love had once been. "There's nothing to talk about," he said. "It's done." When the 30 minutes were up, the officers escorted Noah and Sophia out. They left with 2 hastily packed suitcases and the clothes on their backs. Noah's expensive SUV idled at the curb, looking ridiculously out of place among the patrol cars. "This isn't over," Noah warned as he threw the suitcases into the back of his vehicle. "You'll regret this." James watched them drive away, Sophia's tear-streaked face visible through the passenger window until they turned the corner and disappeared. "Well," Dylan said, breaking the silence, "that was intense." "You okay?" Imani asked quietly. James looked at the house, his house, standing solid and real before him. The place where he'd built a life that had crumbled beneath him. The place that was now his again, on his terms. "Yes," he said. "I'm okay." 3 months passed. James didn't move back into the house right away. Instead, he spent weekends gutting it, stripping away every trace of the life he'd shared with Sophia. He painted over her chosen colors, replaced the furniture they'd picked together, and transformed the spare bedroom once designated as a someday nursery into a home gym. And then he went further. "A boxing retreat," Dylan repeated, studying the business plan James had laid out on the kitchen table. "Here, in your house. Not just boxing," James explained, pointing to the detailed schedule he'd created. "A full physical and mental recovery program. 1-week intensives for men going through trauma, divorce, PTSD. We combine physical training with group therapy sessions." Dylan whistled low. "That's actually brilliant. But where did this come from?" James looked around at the transformed space. New paint, new purpose, new life. "From here," he said simply, tapping his chest. "From what I needed and couldn't find." He named it minus receipt. A reminder that sometimes the most important things aren't what you're given, but what you take back. The business took off faster than he'd anticipated. Word spread through veterans groups first, then divorce support networks, then local therapists who recognized the value of what James was offering. Dylan came on board full-time as the head boxing coach. Imani managed the books and ran the occasional women's self-defense workshop. 6 months after the eviction, James sat for an interview on a locally popular podcast about entrepreneurship. So, James, the host began, minus receipt has become something of a phenomenon in our recovery community. What inspired you to start this unique venture? James considered the question carefully. Life takes things from us, sometimes without warning, sometimes slowly over time. I created Minus Receipt to remind men that they can rebuild, that they have value beyond what's been taken. Hence the unusual name. Exactly. A receipt shows what you paid for something. But the most valuable things in life, self-respect, honor, purpose, those can't be bought or sold. They're what you have left when everything else is gone. You've become known for a particular mantra that resonates with your clients. Would you mind sharing it with our listeners? James nodded. No one can take what you built unless you hand it to them. The podcast went viral in recovery circles. Requests for the program doubled, then tripled. James hired more staff, established a scholarship fund for veterans, and expanded the services to include financial counseling for men rebuilding after divorce. He rarely thought about Sophia anymore. Occasionally, he'd hear snippets of information through Asheville's tight-knit community. She was staying with her brother Briggs, who'd made it clear the arrangement was temporary. Noah had moved out of town after Maura's lawyers completed their scorched earth approach to the divorce proceedings. Life had moved on. So had James, until the letter arrived and IT was addressed in Noah's distinctive scrawl, the envelope cream-colored and expensive. Inside was a single page of heavy stationery. I know what you did, Noah had written, setting me up, turning Maura against me, stealing the house back through legal tricks. Clever, but not clever enough to hide your tracks. I have proof of your conspiracy recordings, witnesses, documents. Unless you want the authorities and my lawyer to receive these materials, we need to talk. $100,000 will ensure my silence. You have 1 week to respond. James read the letter twice, then called Imani. He's bluffing, she said after hearing the contents. What conspiracy? Everything you did was legal. The house was in your name. Maura found out about the affair through legitimate channels. You didn't forge documents or break any laws. But perception matters, James pointed out. Even the suggestion of impropriety could damage the retreat's reputation. We work with vulnerable people. Trust is everything. Imani was quiet for a moment. What will you do? James folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Spring the trap, he said. James agreed to meet Noah at a neutral location, a public park on the edge of town, with enough privacy for conversation, but enough visibility to discourage any physical confrontation. He arrived early, choosing a bench with a clear view of the parking lot. Noah pulled up in a car James didn't recognize, smaller and older than the luxury SUV he'd once driven. He approached with the confident swagger James remembered, but his clothes were less polished, his appearance slightly frayed at the edges. You came, Noah said, taking a seat beside James. Smart decision. Let's skip the theatrics, James replied. You claim to have evidence against me. I want to see it. Noah smiled thinly. Not how this works. First, we discuss terms. Once we have an agreement, the evidence stays buried. That sounds like blackmail. Call it what you want. I call it compensation for damages. Noah leaned forward, dropping his voice. You systematically destroyed my life, Baird. My marriage, my business, my reputation all gone because you couldn't handle being replaced. James felt a flicker of anger, but kept his expression neutral. I didn't destroy anything, Holloway. You did that yourself when you decided to sleep with my wife and take over my house. Semantics. Noah waved a dismissive hand. The point is, you took everything from me. Now I want something back. And if I refuse? Noah's smile widened, revealing teeth that reminded James of a cornered animal. Then I release everything. The recordings of you and your cousin planning to spy on us. The evidence that you conspired with Janine to approach Maura. The drug paraphernalia that mysteriously appeared in your garage right when you needed an eviction. Quite a story. James said mildly. But fiction doesn't hold up well in court. Are you willing to bet your precious retreat on that? Noah countered. $100,000 is a small price to pay for keeping your reputation intact. James studied him for a long moment. The desperation behind the bravado, the hunger in his eyes. Noah Holloway was a drowning man grasping at straws. I have a counteroffer, James said finally. I'll give you nothing, and you'll walk away. Noah laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Why would I do that? Because of this. James pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times before handing it to Noah. The video was short, less than 3 minutes, but devastating. Noah and Sophia, sitting in a coffee shop, heads close together as they spoke in low, urgent tones. We need more money, Sophia was saying, her voice clear despite the background noise. Briggs is kicking me out, and I can't find a job. I'm working on it, Noah replied. Once this deal with Moore's accounts goes through, we'll have plenty. The password you found in her email was the key. With that, I can transfer enough to get us started somewhere new. But how will you explain it? Won't she notice the money's gone? Noah's smile was cold. By the time she figures it out, we'll be long gone. Besides, the documents you helped me forge put everything in my name. It's the perfect plan. The video ended. Noah stared at the blank screen, his face drained of color. Where did you get this? He whispered. Doesn't matter. James took the phone back. What matters is that Maura Holloway's lawyer now has a copy. So does the district attorney. Noah's facade crumbled completely. You're lying. Check your messages. James suggested AS if on cue. Noah's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands and read whatever had appeared on the screen. All remaining color drained from his face. This is a setup, he stammered. No, James corrected him. This is justice. You and Sophia didn't just try to take my house, you were planning to defraud Maura out of her money. That's a felony, Noah. Several felonies, actually. Noah lunged forward suddenly, grabbing James by the collar. You bastard. You've ruined everything. James didn't flinch, didn't push him away. He simply stared into Noah's eyes with calm certainty. No, you did that yourself. A police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing but siren silent. Noah released James and took a step back, eyes wild with panic. You called them. No, James said. Maura did. After she received the video, 2 officers approached, their expressions grim. Noah Holloway, one of them called. We need to speak with you concerning allegations of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Noah turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The officers caught him easily, reading him his rights as they handcuffed him. This isn't over, Baird. Noah shouted as they led him away. You'll pay for this. James watched the cruiser drive away, feeling not triumph, but a strange sense of completion. The circle was closing. The story was ending. All that remained was one final scene. The knock came on a Tuesday evening as James was finishing his workout in the home gym. He toweled off his face and checked the security camera he'd installed after the eviction. Sophia stood on the porch, shoulders hunched against the autumn chill. Her hair was different, shorter, its natural brown showing at the roots instead of the blonde she'd maintained throughout their marriage. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from the carefully curated outfits she'd once favored. James considered ignoring her. There was nothing left to say, nothing he wanted to hear. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or the need for true closure made him open the door. They stared at each other across the threshold, 8 years of history stretching between them like a chasm. Can I come in? She asked finally, her voice smaller than he remembered. No, he said, the refusal gentle but firm. We can talk here. She nodded, accepting this boundary. I heard about Noah, the arrest, the fraud charges, and nothing. She looked down at her hands, which were twisting nervously in front of her. I'm not here to ask for anything. I know it's too late for that. James said nothing, waiting. I've been in therapy, she continued when it became clear he wouldn't speak. Trying to understand why I do the things I do. Why I threw away something good for whatever that was with Noah. Did you find your answers? James asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Sophia gave a small, sad laugh. Some. Enough to know that I was the problem, not you. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "You were always better. I see that now." The words should have brought satisfaction, vindication, something. Instead, they fell flat, meaningless after everything that had happened. James turned away from the door and walked back to the punching bag that hung in what used to be their living room. He began a sequence of jabs and crosses, finding comfort in the rhythm, in the solid impact of fists against leather. "Don't come back," he said between punches, his voice even. Sophia lingered in the doorway, tears streaming down her face now. "James, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but this isn't about forgiveness." He cut her off, never breaking his rhythm. "It's about moving on. I have. You should too. Is there anything I can do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "Anything at all?" James paused, considering the question. Once, he would have given anything to hear these words from her. Now there were just sounds, meaningless vibrations in the air. "No," he said finally. "There isn't." He returned to his workout, the steady thud-thud-thud of his fists drowning out her sobs. When he next looked toward the door, she was gone. James finished his set, pushing himself until his muscles burned and sweat soaked through his shirt. Then he showered, made dinner, and sat on his new deck watching the sunset over the mountains, alone, at peace. 3.1 years later, Minus Receipt had expanded to a second location, a larger property just outside Asheville with enough space for 20 retreats. James had brought on more staff, including a licensed therapist and a financial advisor who specialized in helping men rebuild after divorce or financial disaster. The original house had been converted into offices, with James occupying what had once been the master bedroom. From his window, he could see the forest behind the property, the trees changing with the seasons, a constant reminder that renewal was possible, that life continued its cycle regardless of human drama. Imani had accepted the position of full-time business manager, her organizational skills and no-nonsense attitude proving invaluable as the operation grew. Her son Dion, now 12, often came by after school, doing homework in the small break room or helping with odd jobs around the property. Dylan had taken charge of the physical training program, developing specialized regimens for different needs: veterans with PTSD, men recovering from illness or injury, those rebuilding after personal loss. His natural empathy, combined with his technical knowledge, made him a favorite among the retreat participants. Janine visited occasionally, her interest in James never fully fading despite his gentle but firm boundaries. She'd found purpose in organizing community events to support the retreat, channeling her energy into something productive rather than pursuing a relationship that would never happen. James maintained the balance he'd found: work that mattered, friends who supported him, a life built on his terms. He dated occasionally, but avoided anything serious. His peace wasn't found in romance, but in the quiet certainty of knowing who he was and what he valued. Noah Holloway had pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was serving 18 months in a minimum security facility. According to the local news, Maura had moved to Charlotte to start fresh, her business expanding despite the scandal. As for Sophia, rumors filtered through Asheville's gossip networks. She'd moved back to her hometown, found a job at a local gallery, started over with the humility that comes from losing everything. James wished her well in the abstract way one might wish well for a stranger. Their story was over. The book closed. On quiet evenings, he sometimes sat on his deck with a beer, watching the sunset and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The pain had faded to a dull memory, useful only as a reference point to measure how far he'd come. He thought often of his uncle's words: "If you've got your own respect, you've got something nobody can take away." Now, years later, James finally understood the full truth of that statement. He had lost his marriage, his home, his sense of security, and in losing them, he had found something much more valuable: himself. Sophia, forgotten. Noah, ruined. James, victorious, but not the shallow victory of revenge. The deeper victory of rebuilding, of growth, of transformation. The retreat's booking calendar was full for the next 6 months. Life moved forward, relentless and beautiful in its progression, and James Baird moved with it, on his own terms, minus nothing that truly mattered.